You wake up before sunrise. No alarm, no coffee, no calendar notification informing you that your quarterly mammoth targets are behind schedule. You step outside, and the day is already waiting. Find water, check traps, gather plants, repair a spear, collect firewood, watch the children, process yesterday's food, and somehow avoid becoming today's food. So ancient humans worked every waking minute, right? Not exactly. But they were not lounging beside the fire for 15 hours either. The famous image of the hunter-gatherer with endless free time is almost as misleading as the image of a permanently terrified caveman sprinting from predators. Daily life changed with the season, the landscape, the weather, your age, your skills, and whether dinner had recently escaped. The strange part is that archaeology rarely preserves a schedule. It preserves ash, broken stone flakes, butchered bones, footprints, and the occasional camp floor that looks as if everyone left 5 minutes ago. From those scraps, we can reconstruct days filled not only with hunting and gathering, but cooking, tool repair, childcare, teaching, planning, resting, playing, talking, and moving things from one inconvenient place to another, which, honestly, is still most of adulthood. So what did ancient humans actually do all day? Let's follow the evidence from sunrise to firelight. The short answer is that ancient humans spent their days getting food, processing it, caring for other people, and maintaining the tools and places that made survival possible. That sounds simple. It was not. Hunting and gathering compresses an entire economy into 3 words. Finding an animal was one task. Bringing useful parts back to camp, turning them into food, sharing them, and keeping scavengers away were several more. Plants could be equally demanding. Roots had to be dug up, nuts cracked, seeds collected. Some foods needed soaking, pounding, roasting, or careful preparation before the human digestive system would accept the meeting. And food was only one category. A group also needed water, fuel, workable stone, wooden shafts, cordage, shelter, clothing, and some method of preventing every child from personally testing whether cliffs were dangerous. We can divide much of this activity into 3 broad systems. Provisioning brought resources into the group. Maintenance kept fire, tools, clothing, and camp equipment usable. Care and learning kept people alive long enough to become competent adults. Research among recent hunter-gatherer communities shows why neat claims are dangerous. Some groups have substantial leisure. Others spend far more time on subsistence and domestic work. The result changes with ecology, season, age, gender, technology, and what a researcher decides counts as work. So there was no universal prehistoric 9 to 5. There was something more flexible and often more demanding. Dinner was not a product. It was a project. The problem begins with the human body. It is expensive. Your brain uses a remarkable share of your daily energy. Your skin loses heat. Your muscles tire. Your teeth cannot open every shell. Your hands cannot kill most large animals without tools. And a twisted ankle can turn a productive adult into someone who suddenly needs help. Then there are human children. A foal can stand within hours. A human baby arrives unable to walk, feed itself, recognize danger, or contribute anything except noise and urgent scheduling changes. Childhood lasts for years because becoming a competent forager is not just about growing bigger. You have to learn where water appears, which plants are edible, how animals move, how stone breaks, how fire behaves, and why the colorful insect should remain unlicked. That creates a cooperative problem. The person who finds food may not be the person tending the fire. The best toolmaker may be injured. Someone carrying an infant cannot move as quickly as the scout. Older people may contribute knowledge, processing skill, childcare, or memory of a landscape that younger legs can cross but younger minds do not yet understand. So work was distributed across bodies, ages, and moments. Calories moved through the group. Information did too. Children learned by watching, copying, playing, trying, failing, and sometimes being shown directly. Those lessons consumed adult attention. But they gradually turned extremely dependent children into adults capable of keeping everyone else alive. Human childhood is basically a multi-year survival subscription with no cancellation button. And once survival depends on shared energy and shared knowledge, the neat picture of one hunter supporting everyone else begins to collapse. The conventional story is wonderfully tidy. Men hunted, women gathered, children stayed near camp, Older people sat beside the fire, offering mysterious advice and looking excellent in documentaries. It is also too tidy. Many foraging societies do divide work by sex, age, experience, and physical condition. That makes practical sense. Pregnancy, nursing, strength, mobility, local ecology, and accumulated skill can all affect which tasks are efficient or safe. But a division of labor is not the same thing as a universal rulebook. At Willamaya Padjexa in the Peruvian Andes, archaeologists found a roughly 9,000-year-old young woman buried with projectile points and tools associated with hunting and animal processing. The burial does not prove that every woman hunted or that men and women always performed identical work. It does show that big game hunter cannot automatically be translated as male. Ethnographic records add more variation. In some communities, men perform most large game hunting, while women gather much of the plant food. In others, women also hunt deliberately. Children may collect small foods, carry water, watch younger siblings, or imitate adult tasks through play. Older adults may contribute less speed, but more knowledge, where water lasts through drought, when a plant becomes edible, or which shortcut ends at a cliff. Tasks also overlap. A trip for firewood can become a lesson, a scouting mission, and a childcare shift at the same time. Prehistoric life was not a sitcom family wearing animal skins. It was flexible labor organized around whoever was available, capable, informed, and currently not holding a baby. Which brings us to one of the strangest surviving records of an ordinary prehistoric task. One of the clearest glimpses does not come from a weapon, a cave painting, or the bones of something enormous. It comes from muddy footprints. At White Sands in New Mexico, a human trackway runs across what was once wet ground for roughly 1.5 kilometers. The same person appears to have traveled out and later returned along almost the same route, with at least several hours separating the two journeys. But the footprints are not identical in both directions. On one leg of the trip, the tracks change shape. They become less balanced. The stride suggests someone moving quickly while handling extra weight. At several points, tiny footprints belonging to a young child appear beside the larger ones and then vanish again. The researcher's interpretation is that an adolescent or small adult carried a toddler for much of the journey, occasionally shifted the child from one side to the other, and briefly put the child down before continuing. Think about what survived here. Not the reason for the trip, not the person's name, not whether the child was cheerful, asleep, or delivering a continuous performance review. What survived was the physical inconvenience of childcare. The changing footprints preserve weight being transferred across a body. The toddler's intermittent tracks preserve moments when small feet touch the ground. The outbound and return paths preserve time passing between two parts of the same journey. This is powerful evidence. It is also incomplete. Footprints cannot tell us the traveler's gender with certainty, exactly where they were going, or why the child was carried. The reconstruction comes from stride, track shape, size, direction, and the relationship between the two sets of prints. It is a strong biomechanical interpretation, not a prehistoric security recording. But that is precisely why the trackway matters. Daily survival was full of activities that almost never fossilize. Carrying children, collecting water, transporting food, checking familiar routes, moving fuel, and taking useful objects from one camp to another. A trip could also serve several purposes at once. You might carry a child, inspect the landscape, gather something on the return journey, and exchange information when you arrived. Prehistoric transportation had no stroller, no paved road, and absolutely no customer support department. Just legs, balance, memory, and whatever needed to be moved. The footprints show us a journey. To see what happened when people stopped moving, we need to look around a fire. A small rock shelter in eastern Spain called Abric del Pastor gives us that opportunity. Its Middle Paleolithic deposits date roughly between 63,000 and 48,000 years ago. In one thin archaeological unit, researchers isolated something unusually rare, not the accumulated rubbish of centuries, but what may be the remains of one brief Neanderthal stay. Picture the shelter while it was occupied. A small fire burns near one side, fueled with juniper wood. Selected parts of a red deer have been carried in from elsewhere. Around the flames, Someone cuts animal tissue with a flint flake. Another tool works bone or another hard material, perhaps helping break it for marrow. Small flakes fall during tool use and modification. Meat is processed, heated, eaten, and shared. Then the group leaves. They do not leave a diary. They leave 11 pieces of flint, dozens of bone fragments, a simple hearth, cut marks, burnt bone, and microscopic traces of herbivore fat preserved in the ash. This is archaeology's least glamorous superpower, conducting an extremely patient audit of ancient rubbish. The spatial pattern matters. Many of the remains cluster around the hearth. Use wear on several stone pieces, matches cutting animal tissue, or working hard materials. Red deer bones show fragmentation, burning, and cut marks. Some stone arrived from sources several kilometers away, while parts of the toolkit appear to have been carried onward when the group departed. That gives us a sequence rather than a static picture. Acquire resources, transport selected pieces, light a fire, use and modify tools, process food, consume it, and leave with whatever remained useful. The evidence is powerful. It is also inconveniently incomplete. A few scattered objects may come from other moments, and researchers describe the main cluster as a potential single occupation, not a perfectly sealed afternoon. Still, this brief stop reveals something important. A camp was not where work ended. It was where one kind of work turned into 5 others. If you reduce prehistoric work to its most basic purpose, 3 systems kept appearing. First, get calories. That might mean tracking deer, digging roots, collecting shellfish, trapping small animals, gathering fruit, cracking nuts, fishing, or following bees toward honey. The exact menu changed with the landscape, the season, and what had not already run away. Second, turn those calories into food. A dead animal was not dinner. It was a heavy object with skin, bone, organs, tendons, and several interested scavengers. It had to be moved, butchered, divided, cooked, dried, or eaten quickly. Plants were not automatically convenient either. Tubers might need digging and roasting. Seeds had to be gathered in large numbers. Nuts demanded cracking. Some foods required pounding, soaking, grinding, or heating before they offered more nutrition than digestive regret. The animal did not arrive pre-cut, labeled, and placed beside a recipe card. Third, maintain the system that made the first 2 possible. Fire required fuel. Stone tools became dull or broke. Wooden shafts cracked. Fibers had to become cordage. Containers, clothing, sleeping places, and shelters needed repair. Useful stone or wood might lie far from camp and had to be remembered, collected, and carried. This is why counting only the hours spent hunting or gathering can mislead us. Acquisition was just the visible front of a longer workflow. A successful hunt could create hours of processing. A patch of edible plants could demand careful preparation. Even a failed trip still consumed energy in daylight. Ancient people did not follow a clock. They followed opportunity windows: low tide, cool morning air, migrating animals, ripe fruit, dry fuel, and children who were currently willing to walk. And those windows changed everywhere. A group living beside the sea did not organize time like a group on a cold grassland. Coastal foragers could schedule work around tides, shellfish beds, fish movements, and safe conditions on the water. In colder regions, fuel, shelter, clothing, and food storage demanded more attention. In forests, visibility was limited, plants were scattered differently, and travel followed rivers, trails, and remembered patches of food. Even movement varied. Some groups shifted residential camps as nearby resources changed. Others stayed longer in one place and sent smaller parties outward to hunt, gather, fish, collect stone, or visit another group. Moving camp meant carrying tools, food, fuel, bedding, containers, and children. So, relocation was not a refreshing change of scenery. It was moving house without the house. Season mattered just as much as geography. A few weeks of ripe fruit, migrating animals, nesting birds, or abundant shellfish could produce intense bursts of work. Other periods might involve more repair, planning, visiting, resting, or surviving on stored and less desirable foods. This is why comparative studies produce different estimates of labor and leisure. Among the Agta of the Philippines, people who spent more time in agricultural and other non-foraging labor generally had less leisure than those relying more heavily on foraging. That does not give us a Paleolithic timesheet. It shows that changing the economy changes the day. Nature set the schedule. And nature was the kind of manager who changed it without updating the group chat. But once food was processed, tools were usable, and immediate danger had become tomorrow's problem, ancient humans still had time left. What did they do with it? Those hours were not empty. Talking could reveal where animals had moved, which water source had dried up, who had seen smoke beyond the ridge, or which relative was planning to visit. Planning tomorrow's trip was part of surviving tomorrow. Teaching mattered too. A child watching an adult shape stone was not simply being entertained. The angle of a strike, the choice of raw material, and the moment to stop before the tool became several smaller and less useful tools all had to be learned. Some skills could be picked up through observation and practice. Others benefited from someone slowing down, demonstrating, correcting, or explaining. Which means the experienced toolmaker occasionally had to watch a beginner destroy perfectly good stone. Education has always required sacrifice. Play also belonged inside this system. Children could imitate hunting, gathering, carrying, building, and tool use at low stakes. They were training bodies, attention, judgment, and social rules before mistakes became expensive. Adults needed social time as well. Grooming, joking, storytelling, visiting, sharing food, negotiating partnerships, and repairing conflicts helped maintain the relationships that made cooperation possible. Information could also travel between camps through relatives, visitors, partners, and exchanged objects. We should be careful here. A hearth cannot tell us which jokes were told around it. A stone flake does not preserve a lesson plan. But humans do not inherit complex survival knowledge through genes alone. Someone must observe it, practice it, remember it, and pass it on. So rest, conversation, teaching, and play were not interruptions in prehistoric survival. They were part of its infrastructure. And that does not mean life was peaceful, equal, or easy. This is where the pleasant version of prehistoric life begins to crack. Yes, some foraging communities have substantial leisure. Their days are not always ruled by bells, shifts, supervisors, or the peculiar modern belief that sitting in a meeting counts as movement. But free time is not the same thing as an easy life. A hunting trip could consume a day and return nothing. A storm could erase tracks, soak fuel, or trap people away from camp. A damaged tool could be replaced. A damaged knee was more complicated. Injury, illness, pregnancy, nursing, and age could shift work onto other members of the group just when food was becoming harder to find. And the chores did not pause because the hunt failed. Children still needed care. Water still had to be carried. Fire still needed fuel. Food already collected still had to be processed before it spoiled or became interesting to another animal. Cooperation helped buffer those risks. Sharing food and labor meant one person's bad day did not automatically become a death sentence. But sharing was not necessarily a prehistoric charity advertisement. It could bring expectations, demands, negotiation, prestige, resentment, and arguments over who contributed what. Nor was every burden distributed equally. Skill, status, physical condition, childcare, and local custom could leave some people with more work and less freedom than others. Nature offered no paid leave, no guaranteed harvest, and no complaint department. So we should resist both fantasies. The caveman working every second, and the carefree forager permanently relaxing beside a fire. Ancient life could contain leisure, laughter, play, and long conversations. It could also become brutally busy the moment anything went wrong. So, what did ancient humans actually do all day? Here is the honest answer. We know they acquired food, transported resources, maintained fires, made and used tools, processed animals and plants, moved between camps, and organized activities around shared living spaces. Hearths, stoneware, cut-marked bones, residues, and spatial patterns preserve those actions directly. We can also make strong inferences. Human children required years of care and learning. Complex skills had to be observed, practiced, corrected, and remembered. Injured or unsuccessful individuals benefited from food sharing and cooperation. Footprints suggest that even carrying a child across the landscape could become a significant daily task. What we cannot recover is a universal schedule. We do not know how many hours the average Paleolithic person worked, because there was no average Paleolithic person. We cannot assign every task permanently, by sex or age. We cannot hear the conversations around a fire, distinguish every moment of rest from social obligation, or know whether someone considered gathering fuel work in the way we do. Their days changed with weather, season, landscape, health, skill, and luck. Some were exhausting. Some probably contained long stretches of conversation, play, waiting, and rest. Most were a mixture. Ancient humans did not have one job. They operated a living system in which food, labor, knowledge, tools, and care constantly moved between people. That is the closest the evidence allows us to come to their daily schedule, and it is closer to your schedule than it first appears. Now, return to your own morning. You wake up with an alarm. Water comes from a tap. Food waits in a refrigerator. Heat appears when you press a button. Your tools were made by strangers, your shelter was built by specialists, and someone else transported almost everything you will use today. That does not mean the prehistoric workload disappeared. It was divided, packaged, mechanized, and handed to millions of other people. You still acquire calories. You still carry objects. You still maintain tools, care for children, exchange information, repair relationships, plan around weather, and become annoyed when something essential breaks at exactly the wrong moment. The difference is that modern infrastructure hides much of the cooperation. A supermarket conceals farming, hunting, transport, refrigeration, processing, and storage behind one automatic door. A phone compresses messages that once required walking to another camp. Childcare, medicine, plumbing, electricity, and delivery services perform tasks that once belonged directly to the people around you. So ancient humans did not spend all day hunting. They spent it maintaining the fragile network that kept human beings alive. Food, fire, knowledge, tools, movement, care, and one another. We are still maintaining that network now. It simply has better packaging, more passwords, and quarterly targets that involve fewer mammoths. And if your day has mostly involved food, messages, repairs, childcare, walking, and moving objects from one inconvenient place to another, congratulations. You are still following the prehistoric schedule.